Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 43 of Tour of Japan. And there's not actually that much left in this series now. We are winding down to the close of the series. There'll be more details as to what's coming next as we get closer to the end of the series. But for now, we are featuring one of the two final GT-Rs of the R35 generation that will be featured in this series. And this particular model is the 2008 spec Team Calsonic Impul GT-R. Pretty iconic livery, of course, the blue and white. And as we've mentioned in series before, the GT-Rs of all generations make very strong and very popular all-round JPGT cars. But how does this particular model stack up against the others? Well, interestingly, it's actually got the exact same spec sheet as a couple of the other R35s. Interesting, but probably not too surprising. It actually sits at exactly the same levels as, for instance, the Team Yellow Hat and also the Nismo R35 GT-Rs. And that spec is a 4.5 litre engine, as all of the R35s use, 928 horsepower, 668 pound-feet of torque, 1100 kilos, 664 pp, and 844 horsepower per tonne for the price tag, as all the other R35 GT-Rs are, apart from the Stealth, of 950,000. So, the real question is, considering it has the same spec as some of the others, such as the Yellow Hat, is it worth buying instead of those models, or is it just a case of whichever livery you prefer? Well, on paper, it would seem that they're essentially the same. But, in my opinion, I would actually say they're not the same. Because although their spec is the same, even their PP is the same, and their straight line performance is essentially the same, I wouldn't say that this car handles in the same way as the Yellow Hat or the Nismo. Now, that may be just me thinking that, but to me this car does actually feel slightly different to drive than the Yellow Hat or the Nismo. It actually feels a little bit more tail happy than both of those models. Now, like I said, that may just be me, but it does feel different to me. The other two are very predictable. That's what's so good about the GT-R. It's very grippy, very consistent, and very strong all round. This car is certainly not lacking in any of those ways, but it does feel a little bit more playful to me than, for instance, the Yellow Hat or the Nismo versions. Now, is it worth buying instead of them? Well, in terms of straight line performance, I already said it's essentially the same, and around the track you'll be running very, very similar lap times, depending of course on how you choose to set the car up. But I would say that this model is an interesting alternative, due primarily to that fractionally different, and it really is only fractionally different, it's not like this car drives like a Shelby Cobra or anything like that. That fractional difference in handling does make this car kind of unique, even compared to the cars that share its spec. So if you're looking for a car that is a little bit different to drive, you may want to perhaps consider buying this Calsonic Impul version. Plus, you don't see all that many people using this one from what I've seen. Most people seem to go for the base models, the Stealth models, and also the Team Yellow Hat because it has the most eye-catching livery. This model, though, perhaps surprisingly due to the iconic livery that this car has, does seem to be overlooked sometimes. And that kind of surprises me. I mean, maybe there are people all over the place using this car and I just haven't noticed, but I don't really see people using this particular model. So overall, at 950,000 credits, you're pretty much getting the same value for money on this car as with any of the other GT-Rs. But the main piece of advice that I would give about consideration of buying an R35 GT-R in particular is don't just buy it because of the Alpha TZ3 effect or the Nismo GT-R effect. And what I mean by that is there are certain vehicles on Gran Turismo that people buy because they assume that they're the best. because everyone uses them, so it must be the best. And oftentimes that's just not the case, because as I mentioned earlier, all of the GT-Rs can put in very similar lap times, but beyond that, all of the Super GT cars, specifically of course in the GT500 class, can put in remarkably similar lap times, even with inferior specs. So if you buy this car thinking that you're going to be absolutely annihilating everyone else in the race, and that goes for any of the R35s, that's just not the case. Because cars such as the R34, the Supra, the NSX, the HSV10, they can all keep up with this car. So the main piece of advice overall is this car is an interesting alternative to some of the other GT-Rs with fractionally different handling, but my main piece of advice overall, and this goes for all of the cars in the series, is just keep an open mind, because you may find something that you actually like even more. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.